Aloha kako, can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes.
Yay! Yay, and awesome. Can you also see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Yes.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Let's see. I see Tara, I see Malia, I think I see, maybe that's Sharon. Don't know if that's Sharon. Let's see, there's a cat. Hey, aloha kekoa, aloha oi. See everybody joining in. Oh, my mama is here. Aloha Melissa. I just got a call and I just got some little bit of a heavy news. So I'm gonna actually share my screen, a different screen, and then share this song with you. The original plan was to let me see. The original plan was to be playing music while you're getting your water, you know, all of those things. But I want to share this particular song with you before we get started. The song is called Kaiaulu. And a lot of us know this song, kind of like Kulaiwi. A lot of us know this song. And I'm going to sing it. Can you see me? Can you all see me? If you can see me, unmute yourself and say, we can see you.
We can see you.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad you can see me. Let me see. Okay, this song is called Kulaiwi. Mai kapi ina kala iha eha e ai kamole olu ole ua e iau ko kamae he mamo aloha na aloha o Hawaiʻi kuʻukulaiwi mai na kupuna mai a o he mea nana e kuʻai I ke weo kuʻumau iwi e olau I kuʻulahui he kuleana o ka ʻōiwi o ka ima kana ʻōlelo he Hawaiʻi au mau a mau mai ka piʻina kala iha eha e ai ka mole olu ole hua e iau ko kamae he mamo aloha na aloha e iau kuʻukulaiwi mai na kupuna mai a o he mea nana e kuʻai I ke weo kuʻumau iwi e olau kuʻulahui he kuleana o ka ʻōiwi o ka ima kana ʻōlelo he Hawaiʻi au mau a mau e ala mai Hawaiʻi kuʻukulaiwi mai na kupuna mai a o he mea nana e kuʻai I ke weo kuʻumau iwi e olau kuʻulahui he kuleana o ka ʻōiwi o ka ima kana ʻōlelo he Hawaiʻi au mau a mau he Hawaiʻi au Music is medicine. Music is medicine. Super grateful to be here with y'all today. I'm just going to briefly read you the translation of that song. It says, from the rising of the sun at Ha'e Ha'e to its setting beyond Lehua Island, here I am your child, a beloved descendant of Haloa. Hawaiʻi is my homeland from ancestral times. No one can purchase my birthright, my very being. I live for and because of my people, a native right and privilege. Paramount is one's declaration, I am Hawaiian forever and ever. So mahalo for joining me in getting a bit more grounded before we start today. If you didn't get a chance to, please put your name in the chat. Who are you? Where are you? What do you see when you look outside? Let's see what you have, what we have here. Yeah, I see Sharon. Awesome, Sharon is here. We have Lili Noi Kawahikawa. Aloha oi, Tita, my Kaimuki. My papa also spent some time in Kaimuki. We'll talk about him later on today. I see Avapuhi. I see Jackie. I see Lane. I see Leslie Ray from Pine Ridge SD, maybe San Diego, on the Pine Ridge Reservation.
South Dakota.
Oh, who would say San Diego? Mahalo from South Dakota. Aloha oi. Let me see who said that, by the way.
I did. Rick Rothschiller.
Rick Rothschiller. Aloha oi, Rick. Thank you so much for helping me understand that SD is South Dakota and not San Diego.
Only because I was born in North Dakota, and the AIM action I think was at Pine Ridge in South Dakota.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Rick. Thank you for teaching me before I even got a chance to teach you anything. Very good. Awesome. We have Keani. We have Gail. Aloha, Gail. Let me see. People zooming in from Moscow, Idaho. We have Kat, Tiffany Kakalia from Kealakehe. Lots of ohana here today. Aloha kako. I'm going to share my screen again so that we can get started. Yes, very good. Very good. Here we are. Next. Okay, welcome to this webinar. This webinar is on historical trauma and wellness. My name is Ku'ule, and I'll be your host for today. I see in the camera, I see some ohana. Aloha, Meilin. Aloha to you, Kea. Lots of ohana today. Awesome. Aloha, Moani. Okay, so here's the agenda. We're going to do a little bit of an orientation and an introduction. We're going to talk about this framework that we introduced in our first webinar. We're going to review that framework. And then we're going to talk about the particular component of the framework, which is called the Pahu Moanaliha. It's the word for aquifer. We're going to take a break, and we're going to have our guest speaker join us. We're also going to do some peer sharing, acknowledgements, talk about our next webinar, and then we'll have an open floor. Okay, let's do this shaka activity. Anyone who doesn't know, this is a shaka. Can everyone show me your shakas? Just like this? Yes, some shakas look like this. If you're like maybe like a 50 to 60 to maybe 70-year-old Hawaiian man, like sometimes your shaka looks a little bit like this. Like there's no even bend to your thing. Sometimes it's just like, ho, how's it? How you doing? And it's like barely even like nothing. There's lots of different maybe dialects of the shaka, right? But the shaka means hello and goodbye. Like, hello, how's it? How you doing? Nice to see you. It could also mean thank you. So like if you're driving on the side of, or like if you're driving on the road and someone lets you pass in front of them, they'll throw the shaka and be like, oh, thank you so much, you know. It can be no problem, no worries, I got you. So like, oh, Jackie, thank you so much for making the animations. You know, he's like, no worries, I got you, always, I got you, you know. So lots of meaning to the shaka. If I'm like, oh, okay, Lane, I'm gonna need you to actually change this slide to be this slide number. Lane could be like, okay, yes, I got it, I understand, I got you. You know, these days, a shaka also means it's COVID, so I'm going to stay all the way over here, away from you. We're not going to hug. I'm not going to give you high five. I'm just going to throw this shaka, okay? So now you're equipped with Hawaiʻi greetings. Okay, with your hands. Very good. Okay, so I'm gonna turn off my camera right now. I mean, not my camera. What? I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and I want to see all of you at once, and then we're gonna do this activity. Oh, I see. Oh, Rick, I see you. Is that you surfing over there? Is that a photo of you?
That's me, yeah.
Wow! Sorry, Rick. Would you like to? Yeah, maybe you can run this webinar. That's awesome. That's beautiful. I tried surfing and then I have to try again because it didn't go too well. I just stood up a couple times on the board. Anyway, okay, this is the activity. So everyone again, show me your shakas. Very good. These are shakas that are coming in from all over the world. We have some people in California and also Idaho. We have some people in LA. We have some people in Seattle. All these shakas are coming in from all over the world right now. So I want you to do me a favor. Put up your shaka if you are a doctor, PhD, MD, LMNOP, any kind of doctor. Just put your shakas up. Okay, cool. Cool. We have some shakas up here. We got some little accents. Yes, very good. Okay, you can put your shakas down. Now put your shakas up if you are not a doctor, but you work in like healthcare or public health field, whether you push the buttons or you put papers or you present things or data, anything. Okay, see some people in public health. Put your shakas up if you are a mom, if you're a mom. Oh, some moms. Okay. Maybe Katya, don't need to put any shakas up. Maybe you just keep your hands on. Oh, she was like one-handed over here. She's just going. Pohai is driving, so I'm just like, wait, don't give me any shakas. Anyway, put your shakas up if you are Native Hawaiian, except Pohai. I'll put 2 for Pohai because I know that she's Native Hawaiian. So, okay, I see. Is that Moon Kind Things over there? I see you with your shakas up. Aloha oi. Very good. Okay, now, lastly, but definitely not leastly, if you are not Native Hawaiian, but if you are native to a different part of the world, please put your shakas up. Oh, we got some natives from around the world in the house. Okay, awesome. This activity teaches us who is in the room with us today and in these moments, okay? So I'm going to share my screen again because there's a presentation. Even though this is fun, I do have a presentation for you today. Okay, very good. So this is the activity that we did. Can you see? Throw up a shaka if you can see my screen. Okay, very good. Now, who is here? Okay, as we learned from the shaka activity, all of these kinds of people are in the room. A lot of times, maybe when we do working meetings or peer meetings, there's lots of people who work in the healthcare profession, but maybe not lots of people who live in the community of like public health. So people who are daughters and mothers and like patients, this is a space for all of the people to come together, all of the people who care for life and wellness. So I'm really grateful to see all of you in this space. Now, why are we here? Some of you are here because maybe you saw this event on the PHAC. Some of you are here because maybe you're interested in historic trauma and wellness, or maybe you don't know much about that and you want to know. Maybe you're just my friend and you heard that I was going to be doing this event, so you wanted to come and see me. Aloha, okay? Let's talk about why we're really here, though, because I know you just wanted to see me, but the other reason why we're here is because we are the medicine that we need. We're coming here to learn about how we are the medicine. So we're stepping into this space with each other to learn. We're doing this to recall the tools that we innately have, like our relationship to each other. And we're coming together, all kinds of people, all walks of life, to learn about wellness and how to increase our wellness as a people. I want to just draw some attention to this fish. This fish is called an o'opu. Can everyone unmute yourself and try to say o'opu?
O'opu.
O'opu.
Opu.
O'opu, yes. O'opu is a goby, and it's a kind of fish. There's a Hawaiian proverb, and it says, Ho'i ka o'opu ai lehua I ka mapuna puna. I'm not going to make you say all that, but it means that the lehua eating goby returns to the spring. It's said of those who return to the source. So this event, this webinar, this Zoom conference is an example of what it is to return to the source. We're all in spaces of remembrance that we are not only committed to health in the professional way, but our bodies, our whole bodies, we are the health. So we're returning to the source that is ourself. We are the medicine we need. We're here to talk about that today. How? Can everyone unmute yourself and say the word halavai?
Halavai.
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 Halavai. Mahalo. Halavai is the word for meeting. Like, okay, I have a halavai with the dean today, or I have a halavai with my team. It's also the word for horizon. I was like, what is the English word? Okay, this is a horizon. So halavai is the word for horizon. Now, how are we going to meet here today? Again, this is part of the orientation, right? We're meeting not necessarily as doctor to patient, not necessarily as like professional coworker to professional coworker. We're in this space today, and we're orienting to this space. We're in this space today to meet in the same way that the sun meets the horizon. It's a very large scale thing. We're meeting here today like the ocean meets the horizon. Like we are the ocean and we are the sun, and our coming together is the coming together of the horizon, right? All the things that happen at the horizon. Now, when we look at the word halavai, it teaches us how we meet. So the word ha means breath. We're coming together in this space to focus on our breath, how we breathe as people, how we live as people. The word Allah, it means to awaken. We're coming into this space of awakening, learning more about what it is to truly show up as ourselves as we do this work. Ava is a medicinal root, and Ava represents the medicine. So we're coming together here today, not just to talk about the medicine, but to be the medicine for each other, to show up and be the medicine. So when I see everyone shaka, when we unmute ourselves and we say things, that's medicine for each of us. Now, the word ai in halavai means food or nourishment. We're coming together to be each other's nourishment, to sustain each other, to lift each other up in the everyday life that is public health or even survival, right? That's what we're doing in this space, and that's how we will meet. So if you're wondering like, well, who's taking the notes? And I'm wondering if you'll be, all those things are happening, but that's not the only focus of why we're coming together, right? It's to be the medicine. Very good. If you want to take a screenshot of this, you can do that. But this is part of the orientation process where I say that this space, this peer meeting is going to be a little bit different than the other peer meetings that you may have been to, if you can't already tell. The purpose that we're meeting today is to be the medicine. What is the purpose that we're meeting here today?
Be the medicine.
I heard one person say, be the medicine. Let's all say, be the medicine.
Be the medicine.
Be the
medicine.
medicine.
That's good. Yes, we're here to be the medicine. Okay. I'm really excited to see all of you, and everything is all everywhere. My energies are everywhere. I think I'm going to ask Jackie to share Hu Kawai Mapuna. Hu Kawai Mapuna is a chant that was written by myself to help us to tune in and focus into truth telling, and to bravery and to safety as we step into these spaces of addressing historical trauma and historical pain and the ways that exists in our lives today through the ways we cope with that, like opiate use or polysubstance use. So if you don't speak Hawaiian, no worries. I want you to take this time to ground into yourself and the mana of your place, the power of your place. Mana is the word for power. If you have a water source that you think of or that you go to, whether it's a beach or an ocean or a river or a stream, please think of that. And if you don't, maybe you can take a look at, I think your name is Rich or Rick. Is your name Rick?
Yes, Rick. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Because maybe you can take a look at Rick's screen if you don't have a um, water feature. Can you all see my emails right now?
No, I can't.
Okay,
No, we
thank you.
see
No.
the video.
All my emails just popped up and I said, hey, okay, anyway, thank you. Okay, Jackie, please play Huka Vai Mapuna and let's turn off our cameras for this process.
Ukavai mapuna kapu kahaha ainuha aola akapuha anuai e na gugu na kupuna e malama kamapuna malama kamapuna malama kamapuna I ola loai I mauli olai
And we do this thing where we upoho at the end of our ceremony. Mahalo, Jackie. Sharing my screen again. Here we are. Throw me a shaka if you can see my screen. Mahalo. We've oriented ourselves to this space. And now we're going to review our framework. Before we review our framework, I want to tell you something. The thing I want to tell you is that there is this thing called the class standards. This is kind of important because I learned this when I got this job. I didn't know this before I got this job. I want to tell you about the class standards. The class standards help us to understand why cultural and linguistic frameworks like the Kanilehua model we shared about last time, like the entire theme of our webinar, the class standards help us to understand why those things are important, why cultural and linguistic frameworks are important. So let's talk about the class standards. The class standards were put together and they're supported by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So it's kind of like a governmentally sponsored idea to have these class standards. Martin Luther King Jr. said, of all the forms of inequality and injustice, let me try that again. Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane. And maybe we don't know truly what injustice in healthcare is, but when we serve a certain community and we are not equipped to serve them in the ways that are most appropriate to them, it's an injustice. And so the class standards give us a bit of a blueprint to help us understand how to best serve people who are culturally diverse and linguistically diverse. So if you want to screenshot this slide here, you can, but just letting you know that that's what the class standards are. I'm really grateful, and I'm really grateful for our peers who already know about the class standards. In this part of our presentation today, we're talking about how the Hawaiʻi team is in alignment and works with these standards. So the principal standard is to provide effective, listen to these words now, it's a lot of words, but listen to these words. It's to provide effective, equitable, understandable, and respectful quality care and services that are responsive to diverse cultural health beliefs and practices, preferred languages, health literacy, and other communication needs. So there are words like understandable in here. There are words like respectful in here, and cultural health beliefs, right? Those are all things that are included in the standard. So the Hawaiʻi team, for those of you who know me because we're ohana or we're friends, I work on a team and this is our framework that we're presenting. The Hawaiʻi team put together this thing called the Kanilehua framework. And this is a framework, it's a cultural and linguistic framework to address opioid use disorder. And also it can be applied to polysubstance use. Or for some people who don't know, those are like other terms for addiction and drug use. And for people who don't know, even like in Hawaii, certain places of Hawaii, we're like for the chronics, like that's what we talk about. We're responsible to people who are chronics. That's like the terminology that some people use in Hawaii. But we're responsible to them because they're not chronics. Those are our people. Those are us. They're us. And so as health professionals, we're obligated and responsible to care for them according to this standard in appropriate ways. So this Kanilehua framework does that. The third, these class standards were presented in our needs assessment. So last year when we put together the survey, these are the things that people wanted to learn a little bit more about when it comes to us and our team. This standard talks about leadership in the healthcare field, leadership in places of employment. So the Hawaiʻi team hires cultural advisors. I'm one cultural advisor, and I'm not somebody like in our system of work, I'm not just somebody that's like on the bottom and I'm like, maybe we can put the word aloha in here. No, in the hierarchy of how things are produced in our team, I'm at a higher level where people have kuleana to me. So in the system of how we do things, our team comes together, me included, and we kuka, we talk about things and we plan through things. And then I have a say, and then our PI has a say. So we prioritize these cultural barriers in our decision-making processes, prioritize them. We also do preferential hiring to include people from the communities that we actually serve. So these are just the things, you can screenshot this slide if you'd like, but these are the things that the Hawaiʻi team is doing in alignment with our class standards. We also include photos and branding, like our logo up here with the o'opu we talked about earlier. And we hire guest speakers, we offer honoraria and seek opportunities to support guest speakers like we're doing today. Lastly, this class standard, class standard number 9, says that, you don't have to read all that. It basically says that people in the healthcare profession and people in the healthcare field are accountable to implement rules and policies in our daily work and our daily life that are appropriate, that are culturally and linguistically appropriate. So the way that we've done that in our team is that we start a lot of our meetings with Hukawai Mapuna, and it's a ceremony that helps us to standardize effective communication and communicating with each other in really deep and meaningful ways. That's the standard. We also talk about halavai, and we don't meet just to get things done. We meet in relationship to each other, and that's a culturally anchored practice. So these are things that we've standardized in our work together that is in alignment with this class standard. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that, because these standards remind us that when we do things that are Hawaiian for Hawaii people, when we do things that are native for Native people, or when we equip ourselves to know more about practices that might benefit Native people, it's not an extra credit. We don't go, when we do things, we don't go above and beyond to serve our Native population. That's part of our responsibility. That's innately part of our responsibility. So if we don't have cultural and linguistic frameworks, according to the class standards, we're at a deficit, and we need to find ways to support these frameworks and to support the development of these tools. Basically, the class standards just tell us why the Kanilehua framework is important, and supporting frameworks like the Kanilehua framework, why that's important too. Awesome. So now let's talk about the framework itself. Okay, I'm going to have Jackie share the animation. So if you weren't here last time, no worries. We introduced the framework, which is a cultural and linguistic framework to address opiate use disorder. And this framework, like I mentioned earlier, is also applicable as we deal with any kind of illness. So I'm going to play the animation. I'm going to ask Jackie to play the animation, and then I'll further explain. If you have water, like if you were able to get some water, please take a drink of your water now. In this cycle, the Kanilehua rain falls from the sky toward the earth. Over time, this rainwater percolates through hard rock into the Pahu Moanaliha, or underground aquifer. Meanwhile, as the ohia plant grows upward, its mole, or taproot, cracks through lava rock to draw the water up from the aquifer into the larger tree. When ohia are injured, or when water is inaccessible, ma'aleva, or aerial roots, begin to grow from the tree's higher branches. The function of these roots is to draw in moisture from the Pahu Moanaliha, or the surrounding forest. Each of these components live in relationship to each other and make up the whole of the ohia tree. Did you catch that? This is a cultural and linguistic framework that teaches us to understand public health as a relational process, where everyone involved has a very important role. Awesome. Thanks, Jack. Wait. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Awesome. Thank you, Jackie. Now we have a little bit of an understanding of the framework itself. Maybe not what any of that means, but at least what the framework is, right? I'm going to share my screen again. So the Kanilehua framework is based on the ohia lehua tree. Can everyone unmute yourself and say ohia?
Ohia.
Yes, ohia is a native tree to Hawaii, and our framework is based on this tree. Okay. So the tree and the cycle of water flowing through the tree represents the ways that public health is a relational process, versus you go to the doctor and that's public health. That's not the whole truth. The doctor is a part of a larger system of public health. And if we're going to solve or address, or at least touch upon, opiate use disorder and other things like polysubstance use and all kinds of illnesses, if we're going to touch that, we have to understand that everybody has a role. Everybody has a kuleana, from me to Eric, who is the little person in Tada's screen, to Avapuhi, who is the graduate student, to everybody has a role. So this framework helps us to find our role and to find our medicine in lots of different spaces of our life. Okay, so the Kanilehua rain, which throw a shaka if you can see the raindrops in this diagram. So those raindrops represent optimal health, okay? So those raindrops fall and percolate through the Pahu Moanaliha, which is the aquifer. The raindrops represent optimal health, and the Pahu Moanaliha represents maybe people in vulnerable populations. I can sometimes be considered part of the Pahu Moanaliha. Pahu Moanaliha people are not necessarily just people, like just standard people with opiate use disorders, but also Pahu Moanaliha people are culture bearers who have like culture bearers or any people who have even more of a hardship, even more like deeper. Houselessness is one example of a person who might be the Pahu Moanaliha person. A person who identifies as to be a traditional, like a practitioner, a cultural practitioner. Those people might be considered Pahu Moanaliha people, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Our webinar today focuses on those people, focuses on the Hawaiʻi people. So today we're talking about historical trauma and how that really has a big deal and a big part in opiate use disorder and also other parts of disparity. These are the other parts of the framework that we'll address in the future. Our next webinar is focused on the mole, which is this taproot. We have the ma'aleva that comes down, or these aerial roots, these roots that come down from the tree. That webinar is on grace for givers because they represent our health professionals. And then maybe give me a shaka if you can see the surrounding forest in this animation. Right. So that's the Pahu Moanaliha, which is the moisture of the forest that represents community resources. So can everyone like nod your head if you can understand that this is a framework of public health and addressing illness? Okay, cool. I'm doing a good job because that was the goal. Okay, very good. This is how you apply it. This is an actual application of this framework. Okay, Kanilehua, or the rain in this framework, will always represent optimal health. The Pahu Moanaliha, Kekoa Kealoha, that probably actually is a real person, but I don't know any Kekoa Kealohas, so I use his name in this example. Okay, Kekoa Kealoha speaks Hawaiian. Kekoa Kealoha is a hula practitioner. Kekoa Kealoha is also a Kekoa Kealoha does he fishes and he also surfs. So he does all of these things, right? And he's experiencing and he's suffering from or on a healing journey through opiate use disorder. Now, instead of just seeking a one singular source of help, Kekoa does this thing of looking to his mole. He looks to his taproot. He looks for culturally appropriate and accessible ways to heal. And that includes the hula that he does. That also includes the exploration of his genealogy, like who he is as a person. It includes all of those things. And then he also looks to his ma'aleva, which are these aerial roots coming down. So do you see how Kekoa doesn't only rely on hula and his genealogy practices, but he also reaches out to his ma'aleva, or the aunties and the people who keep him well. These people might help him to access resources that are further away from their ohana or their family. Kekoa also has the option of looking to the Pahu Moanaliha, or the surrounding forest. Hui Malama is a community program that sometimes helps with health issues. So Kekoa might go to Hui Malama through, maybe his auntie might say, Hui Malama has a great program, come to Hui Malama, and he goes there. So that's our framework. That's the review of the framework. Let's take a poll before we go any further. I'm going to actually, okay, it's up. I think Lane put it up. Take a second to answer these questions and let me know if you have any questions of your own as you're doing this. Whew. There are about 20 people who took the poll. Okay, 21, 22. Awesome, more and more people, more and more people. We'll give this a total of a minute. So there are, okay, maybe a minute and 10 seconds. So we have a little bit more time. Please take some time to answer the questions in the poll. Okay, I give it a little bit more time. I'm going to end this poll now and then I'm going to share the results. So just sit tight. 78% of you voted and I'm grateful for each of you. Thank you. End poll. I'm going to share the results. Are you ready? Are you ready to see the results? Here are the results. Many of you strongly agree. You definitely, absolutely can see how community and historical trauma contributes to opioid use disorder. Some of you, sure, yes, I can see that. And there is one of you who can't see that at all. And I'm here for the one. I'm here for the one. You see what I mean? I'm here for the all. But hopefully we have no disagrees at the end of this presentation. Awesome. I'm going to stop sharing this poll. Very good. Can you still see my screen? Shakas, if you can see my screen. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to have Avapuhi share the infographic. Every one of our presentations has and includes an infographic that we make as a team, and Avapuhi puts these together. Avapuhi is a current master's student in the Department of Tropical Medicine, where she's researching biomarkers of HIV-associated neurocognitive disorders. She graduated from Stanford University with a bachelor's in human biology, concentrating on the behavioral development of children and adolescents. After completing her master's, she will attend the John A. Burns School of Medicine to pursue her medical degree. And in her free time, she enjoys spending time outdoors by walking, running, hiking, and paddling. So Avapuhi, when you're ready, please share our infographic.
Mahalo ku'ule. So let me go ahead and pull this up for everybody. And this is basically talking about the historical trauma among Native Hawaiians, but also its applications further than Native Hawaiians, just because there are a lot of groups that do experience historical trauma. So here's the infographic overall, but we're just going to zoom in and look at it piece by piece, if I can zoom in. Okay, it's not zooming in. But first here at the top, I just have a definition of historical trauma itself. So what is historical trauma? Historical trauma includes any traumatic events over time and across generations experienced by members of descendants of racial and ethnic groups, national groups, or even religious groups. And for what I have in this infographic here is just an example of the historical trauma that Native Hawaiians have experienced. So on the left side here, you can see some of the different types of historical trauma that Native Hawaiians experience, such as criminalization of Native Hawaiian religious practices, depopulation due to infectious diseases brought by foreigners, land privatization so that people could grow sugar, sell sugar, the illegal occupation of the sovereign state that is Hawaiʻi, as well as deculturation, which includes the ban of Olelo Hawaiʻi in schools. Olelo Hawaiʻi is the Native Hawaiian language. It also includes ban on cultural practices such as hula. And all of these historical trauma that Native Hawaiians experience do in fact lead to impacts on Native Hawaiian health and well-being. We see an increase in substance use, increase in depression and anxiety, as well as other mental health disorders. We see lifestyle and diet changes due to loss of land for farming and fishing. And then we also see an increase in cardiometabolic diseases due to those lifestyle and diet changes. And the effects of historical trauma among Native Hawaiians has actually been captured. So here in this middle box is some data from a 2014 study of Native Hawaiian community college students. And they thought about the following at least once a year. So 81% thought about loss of ancestral land, 87% thought about loss of language, and 66% thought about loss of self-respect due to poor treatment by government officials. Additionally, 75% reported experiencing ethnic discrimination. And the study found that ethnic discrimination was a mediator between historical trauma and substance use. So while I've only discussed historical trauma among Native Hawaiians, like I mentioned earlier, it's not limited to just Native Hawaiians. Historical trauma is experienced by other groups across the US, including but not limited to American Indians, Alaska Natives, African Americans, Asians, Jews, Muslims, and much more. So it's really important that we look into historical trauma of these groups and see how they are impacting health and well-being. And as this framework is specific for opioid use, I'm looking at how it affects opioid use as well. And we will share this infographic with you. And if you have any questions, you can chat me yeah, you can chat me. Okay, I'll pass it back to you, Ku'ule. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Avapuhi. Avapuhi shared that there is data. I'm not just this crazy Hawaiian just talking about how cultural trauma, historical trauma relates to illness. There's data. There's data that proves that, and there's data that shows that. So mahalo, Avapuhi, for your work. So today's focus, as I mentioned before, is the Pahu Moanaliha. The Pahu Moanaliha is the part of this photo that is reflected by these rocks, but mostly. Huh? Oh, I think that sounded like my mom. I don't know. I think my mom was unmuted. Kalamai. The Pahu Moanaliha is represented by the water here. This represents the struggle, resilience, wealth, and value of our indigenous, minority, and vulnerable populations. So in this webinar, we're talking about, we're giving you a timeline of historical events so that you can relate the two, historic trauma and opiate use disorder. Today, I'd like to present a visceral need. Visceral need is something that maybe people in the Pahu Moanaliha space of life might feel, something that they might not feel safe to say to others. Too many people try to solve opioid use disorder without looking at the pain that causes it. Opioid use disorder requires all of us to come together to address it. It's not just one person on doing one thing. It's a relational process to address this. These treatments and centers, they don't know how to help me. I'm tired of not being understood. There's no place for me and my real issues. There isn't any place for that. Another visceral need says that, like, why is there thousands and thousands and thousands of hundreds of thousands of dollars allocated for the research of disparity, but not as much money allocated for the programs that will solve the disparity? You know, so those are the visceral needs that we're looking at today. We're just holding space for that as we proceed in this conversation. Okay, let's get to that timeline. Here is some context that surrounds Hawaiʻi's history. Now, when you're looking to apply cultural and linguistic frameworks to your community, the community that you work in and with, you wouldn't use this same timeline. You would use the timeline that's appropriate to them. Oh, Kalamai. This is the research, and then the timeline is after this. Yes. So there are two pieces of research that support the relationship. Well, there's multiple pieces of research, but that support the relationship between opiate use disorder, more like illness in general, and cultural trauma. So one of these research articles, it was put together by Dr. Kaholokula et al. And it talks about the ways that people who identify with traditional modes of acculturation are at higher risk of illness. So this study presented data that proves that people who are language bearers, culture bearers, people who are in deep relationship to their land and their practices as stewards of the land are more likely to be ill. That's what that study produces. There is another piece of research, or there's another piece of academia that presents the pokihi. And the pokihi are it's a framework as well, but it talks about what it takes to be well from the perspective of Hawaiʻi people. So these are two pieces of research that also support the idea that illness and also historic trauma are related. Now let's get to that timeline. This is a timeline of historical events. Between the year 300 AD and 1819 AD, there were migrations. There were Polynesian and Marquesan migrations to Hawaii. At that time, our people had a very close relationship with the land and the elements. And our wellness was in relationship to the land, the wellness of the land and the wellness of the elements. This man here, all the way to the left, his name is Kamehameha Pai'ea. Maybe give me a shaka if you've ever heard of the name Kamehameha. Kamehameha. Some people heard of Kamehameha. Awesome. Kamehameha is my 10 greats grandfather. And so this timeline is in relationship to me and to my life, so that you can understand and see the direct relationship between our history and our illness. Okay, so this generation of my genealogy holds Kamehameha. He died in 1819. Now in 1819, between 1819 and the 1840s, you see all of these names on the left-hand side. All of those people were born to my genealogy. Now this woman in the middle, her name is Ka'ahumanu, and because of the influence of missionaries at the time, Ka'ahumanu was led to voluntarily ban all types of culture, all types of like cultural things like hula, which is a practice that keeps Hawaiʻi people close to our wellness and close to our land. Hula is like a dance, but our dance is in relationship to the land that we're on. So Ka'ahumanu outlawed hula because it was a pagan ritual. During this time, Christianity was made the forefront of our religious practice, and there was the Hawaiian Bible was created. Our language was made to be a written language, and the Hawaiian Bible was created, but also our newspapers were born. Hawaiian newspapers were born in this time. Toward the 1840s, Hawaii had a 98% literacy rate. Let's talk a little bit more about the 1940s. The 1840s. The 1840s was a time of excellence for Hawaii people. Absolute excellence. We were excellent and articulate, and we still are. But independence and literacy was literally at the forefront of who we were as a people. And so during this time, this man, his name is Timoteo Ha'alilio, all the way on the bottom to the right with the buttons down his shirt. The man to the left of him in the colored photo is Kaui Keauli. He was our king. Literacy, wellness, advancement, progression, joy, freedom, liberty. That was this era. That was this era for us. And we went through this together. And so in my genealogy, Rebecca Nava'a, who is my great-great-great-great-grandmother, was 4 years old. So this is so I put this picture of this little, do you guys see this little boy in this picture? He is 4 years old. So my tutu or my great-great-great-great-grandmother was that age at the time of literacy for our people. It's a very real, close thing. So we were connected very truly and deeply to our joy and to our wellness as a people. I specifically mentioned the Anglo-Franco Proclamation and steamboat racism and tuberculosis. I specifically mentioned those things because this man, Timoteo Ha'alilio, with the buttons all down his clothes, he was ordered and voluntarily went to different parts of Europe to get signatures that Hawaii was an independent nation. And he had a wife, and he loved his wife very much, but he sacrificed his relationship to his wife, with his wife, to go on this journey for our people and for our nation. And so he was a royal person. And do you see this white guy that's kind of sitting next to him in this photo? He was there as the servant. He was there as the servant to Timoteo Ha'alilio. There was an incident through their travels where they were in some part of Europe, I believe. And the steamboat operator mentioned that Timoteo Ha'alilio couldn't sit at the table because colored people don't sit there. And so that was one of the first times that we as Hawaii people experienced that in such a real way, because we were so disconnected from like the African movement and the racism of the time. But anyway, as Hawaii people, as Pahu Moanaliha people, as culture bearers, we know this man, and we know the things that he sacrificed for our independence to get the signatures of the people around Europe to prove our independence as a nation. And so we know that he had a wife, and we know that he died of tuberculosis on his way home. So we know this face, and we know this year, and we celebrate this holiday when he was able to get those signatures that Hawaii is a national, a free nation, a sovereign nation. And we celebrate this. And so this, like I said, is the time period of excellence. This 1840s, this time period is a time period of excellence. What is this a time period of? Everyone unmute yourself.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Excellent. Absolutely. Mahalo. We were also a constitutional monarchy. Our constitution was born in 1840. And so when we were occupied, at the beginning of our occupation, we were a constitutional monarchy. We weren't just like native people that lived on a piece of land. We had international relationships, and we continue to have those international relationships as a sovereign nation. And so these are all things that are very real for Pahu Moanaliha people, for culture bearers. And maybe people who are not so connected to culture may not have any relationship to this greatness and then the loss that came after it. And so this is what happened in the 1840s. Now, in 1887, there was a bayonet constitution that was signed. Does anyone know what a bayonet is? Someone tell me what a bayonet is.
Gun, right? With a
Yes.
sword.
It's a gun with a knife at the end.
It's a gun with a knife at the end. So do you see this group of people here? This group of people, they were the cabinet members. They were the advisors to the king in the 1880s. Now, these people created a plan for this man on the left, his name is Kalakaua, King Kalakaua, to sign over his rights as a monarch, as a king. So this is called the bayonet constitution because they held a bayonet to his whole body and said, if you don't sign over your rights as a monarch, if you don't sign over the power to us, these people on the right, we're going to shoot you with this bayonet. Like that was a literal threat, and we call it the bayonet constitution. So Kalakaua had to sign over the rights of the monarchy and the power over the land, and also the sugar exports that was happening. He had to sign all of the power over those things to these fine gentlemen on the right. So for people who are disconnected from that history, they're disconnected from that pain. So Pahu Moanaliha people experience a different kind of pain than people who don't know any of this or have any connection to any of these things. We know this face, and we know these faces on the right. And so there's a different level. I have chicken skin because there's a different level of pain that comes with this year and also with the date that this bayonet constitution was signed. In 1893, I'm just getting emotional. In 1893, Liliuokalani, who was the successor to Kalakaua, tried to put together a constitution that restored her power. And when she tried to do that, the cabinet members from the slide before came up with a different plan to depose her, to have her deposed from her throne. And so this photo of Liliuokalani is a very powerful one. She's our beloved queen. She's the last reigning monarch of the Kingdom of Hawaiʻi. And so these people had her, the people from the slide before had her abdicate the throne. And when she did that, there was an uprising, and thousands of people came together in support of our queen. Now, the word U.S. Marines is on this slide because the people in the slide before organized that the U.S. Marines dock in Honolulu and aim a weapon, aim a cannon to the common people of Hawaii. And if Liliuokalani did not agree to be part of this joint resolution, they would open fire on the citizens. So again, there's a violence in our history. And if you're not related, if you're not understanding or connected to that violence, if you don't know anyone in your ohana who is directly connected to that, there's a different relationship to pain. And there's a different relationship to coping with that pain. So this man on the left, his name is John Henry Wise. Just as a side note, does anyone play football? Or anyone ever played football or know anything maybe about the Heisman Trophy? Maybe give me a shaka if you've ever heard of the Heisman Trophy. Lots of people have heard about the Heisman Trophy. So my papa, my great-great-great-grandfather, his coach was John Heisman. He went to Oberlin, Ohio to learn about missionary work. Missionaries sent him away to learn great things and he was very smart. And when he went away, he met John Heisman, and he was an excellent football player. Now, when he came back home, it was 1893. When he came back home, it basically went from this excellence, he came home to this. He came home to the imprisonment of his beloved queen and to his mom, who was a culture bearer, watching these things unfold. So that's my great-great-great-grandfather. He was 25 years old in 1893. I am 25 years old. Well, we're not going to cry today. This is not the Kanilehua webinar. This is not the webinar that's focused on the rain, right? But these are those things. So throughout this process, there were a group of men. Do you see these two men on the right? The bottom picture is Prince Kuhio, and the top picture is Robert Wilcox. Now, these two men, along with my papa, organized to take up arms against the provisional government or against the people from the slide before, like to organize guns and things to try to get the queen back to her throne. And then they were imprisoned because that didn't work, because there was more of the other people than there were of them. But jail. Like, we loved our queen and we loved our land, so jail. You see? So these are all of the things that happened between 1893 and 1978. Now, just as a side note, in order to annex one country to another country, you need a treaty of annexation. Like, that's the process. There was never any treaty of annexation that ever was signed. There is still no treaty of annexation. So to this day, there is no annexation. So there's literally, in the Pahu Moanaliha community, in the community of the vulnerable population people who are related to their language and related to their history, there is still no true factual evidence that Hawaii was ever lawfully annexed to the United States. But we have statehood things, and we have all of these government institutions that are formed against us every day, that affects our wellness every day. And so if you don't know these things, and if you're not related to this history, if you don't have a conscious relation to this history will affect you differently. And the present day will affect you differently. Your pain will be different, and the ways you cope with that pain will be different. So whether or not you, your susceptibility to opioid use disorder is higher because there's more pain. Does everyone understand the relationship there? Okay, now we're looking at the present day. I am the present day. These are the names of the people that were born after those times, and this is me all the way at the bottom. So between 1978 and 2020, lots has happened. but also repatriation has happened, revitalization has happened, but also the re-identification with our land has happened. So then land activism happens. So my papa was 25 years old when he was arrested, and I was also arrested at 25 years old for loving my land and for loving my people. Like literally. So arrest, and then jail at 25, not for being a criminal, but for loving land and for doing the practices and for doing the things. So there's a different kind of pain. There's a different weight to that pain. Do you see? So I'm going to now have us all take a break. Okay. But I'm going to have Jackie play a video. And how many of you knew that I'm a singer, songwriter, musician? Maybe put your shakas up. No? I'm a singer, songwriter, musician. And a friend and I came together to put together a medley of songs that were published in 1893, which is this era. These songs were published in this era, but they continue to be relevant to the people today. So the music and the music video that you will see is a version of a slide of the present day. And I want you to see while you're on your break, I want you to think about how you can help. I want you to think about how you as a public health professional, or you as a mother, or you as a father, or you as a son, or you as a friend can maybe help. What resources do you have? What articles do you know of about cultural safety and about wellness for indigenous people? Like, what things do you know? Like, what practices do you have, even if you're just a person, that might help Native people, not just of Hawaii, but of the world, you know? So please keep that in mind. And I'm going to have Jackie play this video. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so Jackie can play the video. But please watch the video with an open heart and an open mind. Whoo! Mahalo for joining me in the watching of that video. I had to turn off my camera to wipe my eyes really quickly, right? Succinctly, if you get anything from this webinar, I would like you to grasp the understanding that when we are in spaces of dependence on substance or chemicals, opiates, it's related to a pain. And some people have personal pain, and some people have pain that are generations old, that are multiple generations old, and that relate to the land beneath our feet, which we relate to the bones in our body. So the point of this webinar, before we invite our guest speaker up, is to help people understand the relationship between historic trauma and opiate use disorder and disparity in general. I know we don't have time for too much of a whole break, like a full break, but everybody please turn off your cameras. I'm going to take a few breaths. Everyone just let's turn off our cameras and take a breath, take a breather. Hikimai kala aloha wale kala e kaunei ai amalalo kawaiho ai lalo kawai ole huai. And come back to me, and come back to the camera. Please turn on your camera so I can see your paint on your walls and your laundry in the background. Thank you very much. Okay, very good, and we're back. That pule, that prayer, was a prayer that I was introduced to by a sister cousin of mine, and I'm really grateful to hold space for her as she goes through her own healing journey. She is the Pahu Moanaliha. She is the value and the wealth of the water beneath the rock. I'm really grateful to invite her mama, her mother, as a guest speaker for today's webinar. Let me try to share my screen so that you can just see this for a bit. Tiffany Kakalia is a lifelong resident of Mokuokeave. She has extensive experience working in Native Hawaiian communities in areas inclusive of Native Hawaiian education, cultural preservation, and wellness. She's been working for the Department of Native Hawaiian Health for the past 7 years as the Cultural Protocol and Procedures Officer, assisting departmental leadership with building cultural capacity for faculty and staff. Her passion is wahikupuna and the wellness benefits that wahikupuna is ancestral land. The wellness benefits that ancestral land has and provides to Kanaka Oiwi. Her passion is also loving Ku'ule Pereira Kiavekane, who is the host of this webinar. So I'm inviting Tiffany now to either to choose one and speak freely on either of these topics here. So the point of Tiff joining us is to speak on either the question or one of the visceral needs. And as you'll come to find, this is the process for each and every webinar. We'll invite a guest speaker to speak on the visceral need or the question, and then we'll also be inviting you to share. So without further ado, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so we can all see my kua. And are you here?
I'm here.
Aloha oe. Do you have
Aloha
mana'o?
nui.
Do you have mana'o?
You know, first of all, that was a very true statement. I love you dearly. Very, very, I'm so very proud of you for being who you are in our family, to do what you do and step into this pretty difficult, big kuleana for us and others. So mahalo nui for all that you are. Yeah, a lot of what you shared in the first part of this webinar, really, you don't mean to be emotional. And I think others in the audience may have that unexpected, overwhelming, you know, effect of what you presented, because many of us do feel things because the blood of our ancestors run through our veins. And, you know, regarding research and how, from a community perspective, how I wish I knew the research that has been done and is being done on wellness and aina, wellness and land, connection of kanaka aina akua, man, place, and a greater being, a greater realm. I wish I knew that there was, because there is research, particularly with standing in protection of what most would call a land feature, but we call kupuna, and that is our mauna awakea. And, you know, for the many years that I've worked in advocating for the wellness of the mauna, to be kept in the highest esteem place that she is and deserves. I wasn't ever aware of the research that was done of things in that nature. So if I did, I think maybe the outcome of the Supreme Court's decision may have been different. You know, I forget what it was called, the national standards that you presented. That the way I see that document is somewhat of a translation of cultural application of the practices that we have, the things and the way we do things. And then you have these standards in another language, not just the literal language, but the meanings and the understandings of these standards here that can really help. So getting back to the Mauna issue, the whole thing with developing anything on Mauna Kea is that, I mean, there's many different issues around the development of not just the 30-meter telescope, anything. There's controversy on how this land base became under the control of the state of Hawaii. And with the given information that you provided just earlier, you know, so there's issues around that. Nevertheless, it is under the care of the state of Hawaii as conservation land. Conservation land, to acquire a permit to build on conservation land, you need to meet 8 criteria. And the 8th criteria is that this development would not cause harm to people. And I wasn't able to provide enough proof, validation, research, data that proved that developing something, anything more on a land base that is not just sacred to me, my family, and Hawaiian people, but is considered a family member to us, that would be harmful to anyone, to myself, to anyone. But you know, working for the Department of Native Hawaiian Health for as long as I have, I know that there is research that has been done. There hasn't been anyone except Dr. Kaholokula that has been able to help me kind of link to those research tools. So in doing research, it's a great thing. And I hope that researchers can maybe see another perspective to the end result of what their findings are, what their reports are, is that for some, that becomes weapons of warfare for us to stand in protection because the research was done. The language is, you know, provided in a way that I'm not an academic, I'm not a scholar, I don't know I'm not a lawyer, I don't know what the system needs to hear that what they keep doing to us is beyond painful. So my, you know, my suggestion to researchers and those that have access and know about particular kinds of research that can help people in the native people that are in a place, in a position of that Pahu Moanaliha level, to be able to not just get out of it, but become the strong pillars in the community that they are and can be and should be. So I don't know if that really answered the guiding question. But I do know that going through something like that, kind of blind, you know, standing in protection of Aina, going into that somewhat blind, on top of the many other challenges that everyday people have, let alone the things that affect you that you don't understand, but it comes to you through generations. Being in these places and walking in the footsteps of your ancestors is opportunity for intercession with them. And not even that will give you all the answers. Yeah, I can see how popping a pill would be much easier to just stop the pain, not solve any challenge or run away from anything. But I honestly don't know if many people understand what that pain feels like. So, you know, we all have people that we know may be related to that suffer through some sort of addiction. To be able to have healthy boundaries and not go down yourself is a challenge. It's way more than just an addiction or the use of substance. Research is a powerful tool, and getting it to people that can make use of it is I think such a powerful way of helping communities. So I don't know if that answered your questions or if that helped any.
It does, and it did. Thank you. I'm really grateful because as I was growing up, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm really grateful because as I was growing up, to everyone who's joined us today, as I was growing up, Tiffany has taught me so much of how to be strong and how to advocate for Native issues in all spaces, let alone the space that is public health and wellness. And Auntie mahalo ya oi, mahalo palena ya oi, no ka mana o ko na au, no ko kupa'a ana I ka pono no ko kako ohana holo o ko'a, he mahalo palena ole ya oi. Yai. For some context, Tiff has dedicated a really large chunk of her life to the protection of our aina, to the protection of our land, particularly to the protection of our mountain. And so Pahu Moanaliha, or aquifer people, or people who are particularly culture bearers or houseless people or frontline people, those kinds of people experience pain differently, right? That's what we're saying. Now, what Tiff was mentioning is that in her frontline work, as a person who stands in protection of land, as we would our own mothers, as a person, as a Pahu Moanaliha person, it would be and is still so important for us to have access to readable, understandable, relevant data and research that supports us. And a lot of you who are professionals or who are maybe even in some kind of relationship to research have the power to take that data and that research and put it into action by supporting Pahu Moanaliha people. And so that is our direct relationship to the wellness and to the healing of the Pahu Moanaliha people. And so I just mahalo you for being the guest speaker for today. The function of the guest speaker is to model how we each are to share. And I think I'm gonna share my screen again so that you can see, but I think we're prepared to share too for ourselves. We have some time, and I hope that if you're a peer from a different jurisdiction, you might consider participating. If you're present here today, I hope that you consider participating in this part of the webinar. But I would like you to choose one and speak freely about choose one and speak freely. Just it's there. Choose one and speak freely. I'm going to maybe allow just a minute for you to read the prompts and to develop some kind of mana'o or some kind of thought or perspective on either the guiding question or the visceral needs that we spoke about earlier today. You don't need to be Hawaiian. You don't need to speak Hawaiian. You don't need to be in Hawaii to interact with this framework, especially in this way that we're doing right now. As you understand, the Pahu Moanaliha concept, which is part of the Kanilehua framework, is very specific to Hawaii. But please apply these concepts of vulnerability and historic trauma and pain to your jurisdiction. Please, as you're thinking through these prompts, think of how you might do that in relationship to yourself. And if you don't know, just share what you do know. I'm going to allow for a minute for everyone to think through. Okay, awesome. Do we have any volunteers who might want to share?
I would like to share.
Yes. Please say who you are and where you are.
Yes,
Where you?
I am on the island of Kauai, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you. And thank you for the mana'o, the ike. It's so helpful and filled with passion. And of course, I understand the tears. It's a very emotional topic. We talk about the rootedness in trauma and how it's intergenerational. So in sharing intergeneration, that word, I think about all of our families that are affected by the substance abuse issue, and whether it's opioids or methamphetamine or alcohol or whatever it may be, polydrug use even. I can speak personally that one of the needs I see that is left to us as kupuna to figure out is how to teach our little ones about compassion for the generation that may have fallen, and that hope is everlasting, that even though we may see lots of difficulties and may feel neglected, unwanted, hurt in our own way, we don't fully understand the pain of the person who is dosing themselves from their own pain, spiritual pain, historical pain, relational pain, and that there can be lots of mountains that are leveled because of all this pain. And as we kind of wallow around trying to navigate through it all, we don't even know where our paddles are. So I think about as a kapuna, one of the responsibilities is to build the paddle, carve out the canoe, the whole family and community inside, and we all go together to work together, because it's not about one person who has a problem who needs to be fixed. It's about all of us suffering, and that perhaps there was a way we parented where we didn't understand. Maybe there was a way that we were part of that traumatic past. It's hard to know, but most of all, I think to help our next generation is to teach compassion, understanding, because our children can be so angry that they don't have their needs met. And sometimes the kapuna have to come forward and fill that gap. But if we can help them learn to be well educated and knowledgeable about that painful track, what those opioids and other drugs are about, and why people they don't choose to be addicts, right? Although people say, there's a whole camp that says, oh, but they chose that way. They could give it up anytime. And, they choose their drugs over their kids, over their family, over their community. It's like, it's not that simple. It's not a head thing. It's a heart and soul and spirit thing. So those are my comments. And thank you for the opportunity.
Mahalo, tell me your name again.
I'm Victoria Navarro Oana, and I'm a Chamorro from Guam originally. And I didn't grow up with my native father from Mexico, but I did grow up with an African-American man from the Deep South who taught me a lot about loving community and compassion. Thank you.
Mahalo for sharing. I feel a lot more grounded than I did before you started to speak. And I am really grateful that all of the things that I and my team hoped to be transmitted through this time was received. And when you talk about the va'a or the canoe and treating wellness and healing and recovery to any disparity, let alone opiate use disorder, as a relational process, I feel so held, because that is exactly what our webinar series is meant to portray and to say. And so mahalo for coming today, and I hope that you continue to come. We have more webinars in the future, and I'm just so grateful. We also have peers and an official OD2A, like the programmatic. We have peers in Guam also. And I know that it's a Saturday morning in Guam right now, but I hope that they'll watch this recording and see you at the end. So I'm just so grateful. I think we have time for maybe one more mana'o to answer this question. Answer this question or speak to this visceral need.
I have a mana'o to share if no one else does. I want to be like the second choice. Does anyone have? Can you put the questions back up? Because there was this particular one that I was So the final bullet where it says these treatments and centers don't know how to help me, and I'm tired of not being understood, and there's no place for me or my real issues. That is a very real and resonant and prevalent sentiment of young people in residential treatment facilities. It's been many years since I was working. Years ago, Hawaii had a SIG grant to address seclusions and restraints in residential treatment centers in Hawaii. So where youth would be hospitalized for psychiatric issues, which oftentimes were dual diagnosed with opiates and ice and just a lot of complex situations. And I would often hear, so my role on that project was to consult with these organizations or these treatment facilities at all levels to look at ways to eliminate seclusion and restraints. And this was in the early 2000s, and I think some of the interventions have fallen by the wayside. Transparency is definitely one of them. You know, transparency throughout your whole organization, with the families, with the people who you're providing treatment, with the child welfare staff, with care coordinators. And one of the things that were implemented was cultural-based activities that helped these young people and their families reconnect, literally reconnect to their name and to their place, to the great, wonderful things about it, as well as the painful and less than stellar aspects of their names and their places. And so I think with a project like this, you know, using data and putting it into action, really the framework can help, I think, people at all echelons of organization kind of look at sort of the question that you're asking, think about how we can help. And so as an everyday person, you know, there's things you can help with. But for those who are on this webinar that are in positions of perhaps administration or positions that train or collaborate with other organizations, really taking a look at your physical place and kind of draw off of not just the people, but the actual place, and look at what your assets are, whether it's, you know, natural resources, or if you're in urban areas, you know, there are things to help people ground and connect to, because for not everybody's going to connect to an ohia tree or a pine tree. Some people may need something that is maybe a landmark in the city that, you know, they grew up in, whether it's an inner city, or helping them understand the history of that place. And history will include very uplifting and very demoralizing things, you know. And so to be able to utilize that, again, if you're an administrator, like, take a double look at requests or budgets when they're saying, what, you want to take the kids or the people, or you want to do this treatment, you know, at this park, or you want to do this treatment where? Like, really start from yourself, look at what grounds you, or what resonates with you as the individual, not just the administrator, or not just the therapist or the teacher, but start with you as the individual, because that's where clarity begins. And then really look at who are your allies in your workforce and on your teams, and try to create really clear goals and objectives into how you can collaborate and support each other in that task of paying attention to yourself, your place, and how you're connected to your place in your name. And it might seem like a silly task, however, that's like lifeline for many of these families and children who are in these treatment centers, like don't know up from down, left from right. So if we, as people in positions of authority and power, do not have that wherewithal for ourselves and then our immediate teams, then it's going to be very difficult for us to even be able to recognize data that can be useful and implemented into action. So, Oya Vale, that's all. Thank you.
Mahalo. I feel like you just gave us an entire map to address the cultural trauma that comes with our history. I feel like really honing in to actual place, the actual trees, the actual mountains, the actual place is one tool to help the Pahu Moanaliha people. So mahalo for your contribution. I think Tiff had some manao.
Yeah, I just wanted to add kind of on the along the lines of what Noi is saying is to be also mindful that cultural competency should also you should also be aware of not just having people as resources because of cultural competency. Pay attention to, it's helpful to pay attention to proficiency levels of what people know about culture in helping people that are going through recovery. There are many times, my daughter is still struggling through her recovery. And the several attempts that she has made to be in different recovery centers, every single one of them has asked her to step up as a leader of pule, of what should we do, what is appropriate, when she's suffering through a process in herself. But because she knows a little bit more than people that are suggesting that maybe in these cultural resource positions, that's an additional struggle for her, you know. So like Victoria was saying about looking at our children, there are more children, more young people in Hawaii that have strong cultural identity, strong Ike Hawaii, strong knowledge of traditional ways, language. And when others kind of present them with a treatment or a process that they know is very surface, they're gonna call BS on that. And that's gonna affect their recovery, you know? And so even in my own work, with communities, with the university, cultural competency is a very catchy term, phrase that, you know, people may throw around, but really what does that mean? Because I end up challenging proficiency levels. And I'm not a practitioner, I'm not an expert in anything. My job is to ensure accuracy and appropriateness when using culture. So if that means to bring in experts, go ahead and seek those people out. More than likely, they're not in a university or institution. It may be. More than likely, they're out in the community. So that was just my manao. Mahalo.
Mahalo. It's me, everyone. I have an associate's degree, and that's it. But oh no! Hello? Hello? No.
I have another comment if you have time for that. The proficiency level. This is going back to what I really strongly invite everyone to do when you're looking at proficiency and cultural competency, again, it's going to come back to you, the individual person. Whether you're the CEO, whether you're the executive director, chair of the board, you're, the president of Uganda, United States, whatever, it's really, really important to know yourself. Know yourself, know your name, know where you came from, know whether, maybe it's not trees or bushes or building, it might be buildings. Really go into that, because for some people, and I'm just taking all the alphabets off of everybody's names and titles, there's glory and pain behind those things. And so if you are on a team that is a high-powered team, strongly, strongly invite you to do that work, because that's what's going to really strengthen that. What's the root in your model? The mole? Is that the mole? Okay. That model is an excellent model, because that root will be strengthened when you know these simple things. Some people do not like their name. So on their birth certificate, it says this name, but we're calling them something else. There's a reason for that. People have names that change with seasons of their life or life experiences. So again, whether you're the chief medical officer, or you're the support team, I strongly, strongly urge everyone to look at that. It's something that we teach our children in preschools. And it's, what was that? Everything you need to know, you learn in kindergarten, once upon a time. That still applies. Like the things that our grandmothers or our grandfathers are like teaching you your name. Because when you have in Hawaii, and I'll speak to Hawaii in particular, I'm not sure like with the peer groups, what that constellation looks like in your community, but in Hawaii, we have a large cohort of young people whose proficiency in language and practices supersede those with titles and names. And so really, if you're going to try to implement something and you don't know yourself and you don't know how to address that, your teams may feel really quickly maybe affronted or offended or contentious. But it's just the fact of our Hawaii right now. Like our children are fluent in language, our children are fluent in practices, and those are the Pahu Moanaliha. Many of them are those people who they're struggling because they're so rooted there, but there's nowhere to attach. There's no, what is it, Pahu Moanaliha, that surrounding forest to nurture that. So the model is applicable. And as simple as it sounds, really, it requires self-search, so that mole for, to be able to, crack through the lava and be able to get to really have a sustainable and synergistic, healthy community. And so, yes, the opioid use and these overdoses and all of these really painful situations, really, costs could really greatly be reduced if we just start with our name and start with our place individually. I don't have the data for that. Hopefully.
We'll find it. We will. Everyone here, we just gotta look.
All right. Sorry, blah, blah, blah.
No, mahalo yaoi. I just messaged Sharon. Sharon Garrett is from Washington. Sharon, are you from Washington? Alaska?
I'm from Washington, Seattle.
Washington. Okay, that's what I thought. I was messaging Sharon that I really appreciate seeing her in these spaces because she's part of our work, our small work. We're all here for the big work of wellness, but Sharon and I are colleagues in our small work that is our, like the, you know, the specific work. And she saw my name in the chat. I guess it's Kiana. Kiana is my first name, and my mama calls me Kiana, and my ohana, they call me Kiana. But when I decided to take up cultural anchoring in my youth, like maybe after I graduated from high school, I decided to go by my middle name, which is Ku'ule. But as Noi was talking about names, I was talking to Sharon about my name. And so I was just so grateful for that synchronicity. And then I remembered it was a medicine for me to hear Sharon call me Kiana, because I didn't hear anyone call me that in a while. And I was wondering how she knew my name. It's my name on this webinar thing. But anyway, I just kako'a the importance of names. And so I really mahalo for everyone who's contributed to this webinar. And I really hope that the poll reflects that people at least sort of understand now the relationship that we have to, that cultural and historic trauma has to opiate use disorder. I'm going to ask Lane to launch the poll again. I think I'm sharing the wrong screen. Hold on. Oh, no, I'm sharing the right screen. Am I muted? Am I? Can you guys hear me? Okay. It's like, hello? Awesome. Just about 80% of us have voted. So I'm going to end the poll at the minute mark, at the 1 minute mark. Looks like we're a little bit over time. It's 2:02. If anyone needs to go absolutely right now, I am also one of those people that needs to go very soon. But we're just about closing up. So we're at the minute mark. I'm going to close the poll and I'm going to share the results. It looks like the most of us strongly agree that we can identify ways to contribute, that we can identify how community and historical trauma contribute to opioid use disorder. I'm going to stop sharing this poll. Thank you all for participating. Let's see, are you able to see my screen? Okay. In Hawaiian tradition, the work that we do is more important than the individuals who have brought it forth. So we always acknowledge our team and our team members last, though they are all of the people that made this possible. I want to give my aloha to all of the overdose data to action people who have joined us from other jurisdictions. And by overdose data to action people, I mean like the ma'aleva, like the professional, like the health professional people that came to our webinar today. I hope you all join us soon, but I just want to give a huge shout out to Kat, who is our principal investigator. She's the leader of our group, to Jackie, who is the project manager. Jackie does a lot of the communications, and he's designed the, he's put together both the Hukawai Mapuna video as well as the animation. I'm so grateful for Jackie. Vivian and Lane are graduate students who have a lot to do with the communications. So if you ever get an email from them, or it's from us, but they probably had a lot to do with drafting it. Maylin is so gracious to come into our spaces. She's here today with us, and she always helps us to make sure that we're carrying her spot in good ways, because she used to be the person who deals with peer relations. Now that's me and Vivian. Also, Avapuhi, as we know, is our grad student who recently got accepted into the John A. Burns School of Medicine. We're proud of her and we're grateful for her work with our team and also with our infographics. I want to mahalo Dr. Amelia Borofsky for her work as our evaluation specialist. And I also want to give a really huge aloha to my apo, who will make 100 years old this year. She's in the photo next to me, and she's a very important part of my life. She's where I get the name Ku'ule from. But yes, that's our team. I'm gonna just take just a second to look at these photos. These photos are representative of Pahu Moanaliha people. when we look at the word vulnerable populations, it's not necessarily like pity puting, like, oh no, they're so poor thing, like they're just like they're just, you know, so poor and we need to help them because we love poor people and we need to restore the poor. No. People who are Pahu Moanaliha people are very strong people who are just a little bit further away from their strength. And so when we think about people in vulnerable populations and minority populations, as we work to serve them, as is our kuleana or our responsibility, as is our privilege to do as healthcare people, we think about these photos and we think about the strength and the resilience and the nourishment that they are. And we keep that in mind as we work with them to remember their own strength. And so thank you, Kat, for putting this photo bank together. These are all photos that Kat took. So I'm just grateful. Kat, can you just really quickly go through the mo'oku auhau of our program for people who are joining us that are friends or that might not know?
Yes, absolutely. Mahalo, and mahalo so much, Tiff, for joining us today and being part of our team today. So we are located at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, which is in Honolulu on the island of Oahu. We are in the Thompson School of Social Work and Public Health in the Center on Aging in the Pacific Health Analytics Collaborative. So that's where you can find us. We are funded by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention through a grant given to the Hawaii Department of Health and the Behavioral Health Administration. Mahalo, Tammy, for joining us from the Adult Mental Health Division. And this funding is specifically for overdose data to action. And we are part of the peer-to-peer learning coordinators. And so mahalo especially to our peers who have joined us today and for all of you together today to be our peers in this learning. We so appreciate you. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Kat. You're my favorite. Awesome. Okay, so that kind of concludes our webinar today. Next time, we're going to be joined by a dear friend of mine whose name is Kawila Nui Makehai Kalani Kiali Ikanaka Ole o Haili Lani. And you can't call him anything else. You have to call him that whole name. No, I'm just kidding. But we'll be joined by him on June 18th from 12 to 2. And if you haven't already, please register for that webinar. We'll be talking about cultural resilience and wellness with him. He's a practitioner of sorts, and we'll be talking about the wellness of our Pahu Moanaliha people. Then, in case we didn't know, this is the end slide that I forgot to take out that little piece that says end slide. But anyway, mahalo palana ole. Thank you so much. I have to go because I'm catching a flight to Oahu and just about my plane leaves soon. So I need to ha'alele. I need to leave this webinar. But I think I'm not the only host. And I think actually when we close the webinar, there will be an opportunity for you to take a survey. I think that's the way that this thing is set up. And if it's not, then maybe you'll get it in your email. Also, please look out for our follow-up email that includes the actual articles, the full articles that we shared today in the contextual part of our presentation. I'm just so grateful that you are all here. I also want to mahalo Rebecca. I met you last time, and so thank you for coming back. Rebecca shared about the kaolin clay. Also, just mahalo to my mom and to Kalena and to Tammy and to Tara and to Kamalani and Amelia and Lili Noai Kawahikawa. Just everyone who's made today so awesome and effective. Just mahalo. And Kat, do we have anything else before we close the webinar?
Maybe we pull out.
Yes. Okay. I know I already said this, but Auntie Tiff, thank you for joining me today. We always stand hand in hand in all of the frontline work that we do, and I'm grateful to be in the back lines of teaching with you here. For those of you who don't know, we do this upoho. We do it. An upoho is a kind of clap where you make your hands round, and then you twist it together like this to make this cup sound. The first upoho represents all of the medicine and the goodness, the joy of this webinar, the medicine of this webinar resonating inward, penetrating through our skin and through our bones, into our organs, and even in our bloodstreams so that we are well. The second upoho represents that same joy, that same medicine reverberating out through the walls, through the windows, through the soil, through the grass, through the ocean, as we are all connected through the ocean. So I'm going to count down from 3, 2, 1, and we're going to upoho together. And hopefully everyone is unmuted. So if you can unmute yourself now, that'd be awesome. You can also reach us anytime through email or.
I'm right here.
Anyway. Okay, so we're upohoing in 3, 2, and 1. Awesome. Mahalo palana ole kako, and I will see you maybe on June 18th.
Mahalo nui.
Aloha.
Aloha. Mahalo.
Aloha.